The day I discovered I was my mother's dirty little secret was the day that changed everything. Mother's Day 2023, when a single Facebook comment unraveled 28 years of lies. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 28 years old, and until 3 months ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was and where I belonged in my family. I work as a marketing coordinator for a tech startup in Austin, Texas. Nothing too glamorous, but it pays the bills and keeps me busy enough to avoid thinking too much about the complicated relationship I've always had with my mom. Growing up in suburban Dallas, I was always the odd one out. While my 3 siblings, Jake, 32, Emma, 30, and little Tommy, 25, all shared my mother's striking blue eyes and golden hair, I inherited my father's darker features. Brown eyes, chestnut hair, and a complexion that tanned easily in the Texas sun. "You're just like your dad," Mom would say whenever anyone pointed out the differences, but there was always something in her voice, a tightness that I could never quite understand. The morning of Mother's Day started like any other Sunday. I was in my small apartment, nursing my second cup of coffee and scrolling through social media while debating whether to drive the 3 hours to Dallas to see the family. The relationship with my mother, Linda, had been strained for years. Not hostile, exactly, but distant, in a way that left me feeling like I was always trying to prove I belonged. That's when I saw it. Mom's Facebook post popped up in my feed at exactly 11:47 a.m. The caption read, "Blessed to be the mother of these amazing kids. Happy Mother's Day to me. Jam blessed Nanj family. Mother's Day." Below it was a collage of photos, professional family portraits, candid shots from holidays, graduation pictures, Jake in his Navy uniform, Emma with her newborn daughter, Tommy at his college graduation. I scrolled through every single photo. Twice, I wasn't in a single one. My hands started shaking as I stared at the screen. 43 photos of family memories, spanning decades, and I had been completely erased. Not one picture included me. Not our family Christmas morning from last year where I'd driven through an ice storm to be there. Not Emma's wedding where I was a bridesmaid. Not even the casual dinner photos from Tommy's birthday just 2 months ago. The post already had dozens of likes and comments from family friends, neighbors, people from Mom's church. "Beautiful family, Linda. You raised such wonderful children. What a blessing." I screenshot the post, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. This wasn't an oversight. You don't accidentally exclude one child from 43 photos. This was deliberate. I was about to call Emma. She was always the peacekeeper in our family, when a new comment appeared that made my blood run cold. Margaret Hoffman, Mom's longtime friend and neighbor, had written, "Linda, honey, this is beautiful, but I have to ask, why don't you ever post about Sarah? I've known your family for 15 years, and I don't think I've ever seen you mention her on social media. Is everything okay between you two?" The comment had been posted just 3 minutes ago, but I watched in real time as the likes on Mom's post stopped coming. Then, one by one, I saw the 3 dots that meant people were typing responses. My phone buzzed. A text from Jake. "Sarah, did you see Mom's post?" Another buzz. "Emma, call me, now." And then another comment appeared under Margaret's question. This one from my mom's sister, Aunt Carol, who lived in Oklahoma and only saw us at major holidays. "Wait, Margaret's right. Linda, I just realized, I don't think you've ever posted a single photo of Sarah. Not even when she graduated college. What's going on?" I watched the post like it was a car accident I couldn't look away from. More comments started appearing. Family friends asking questions. Cousins chiming in with confusion. And through it all, Mom remained silent. My phone rang. Emma's name flashed on the screen. "Sarah," she said the moment I picked up, her voice tight with something I'd never heard before. "We need to talk. All of us. Something's not right here, and I think there are things about our family that none of us knew." I stared at my reflection in my apartment window, seeing my father's dark eyes staring back at me, and for the first time in my life, I wondered if the man I'd called Dad my entire life was actually my father at all. The secret that would destroy everything we thought we knew was about to come out, and I had the sinking feeling that I was the secret. The drive from Austin to Dallas had never felt longer. 3 hours of Texas highway stretched ahead of me, but my mind was racing faster than my Honda Civic ever could. Emma had insisted we all meet at Mom and Dad's house by 6 p.m. Emergency family meeting, she'd called it. The Facebook post was still up, now with over 60 comments, most of them asking the same uncomfortable questions about my absence. I'd tried calling Mom 4 times during the drive. Each call went straight to voicemail. Dad answered on the first ring when I called him. "Sarah, sweetheart." His voice was strained, tired in a way I'd never heard before. "Are you driving up? I'm about an hour out." "Dad, what's going on? Have you seen Mom's post?" There was a long pause. Too long. "We'll talk when you get here, honey. Drive safe." The line went dead, leaving me with nothing but the hum of my engine and a growing sense of dread. When I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home, a modest 2-story colonial in a quiet suburb, Jake's truck was already there, along with Emma's SUV. The house looked exactly the same as it had my entire life. White siding, blue shutters, Mom's carefully maintained flower garden lining the front walk. But somehow, everything felt different. Emma met me at the front door before I could even knock. Her usually perfect blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her blue eyes were red-rimmed. "Thank God you're here," she whispered, pulling me into a hug that felt desperate. "Sarah, I've been going through old photo albums all afternoon. Something is seriously wrong." "What do you mean?" She glanced back toward the living room, then lowered her voice even more. "I mean, there are almost no pictures of you as a baby. Like, none. Jake has an entire album from his first year. I have 2 albums. Tommy has 1. You have maybe 10 photos total from your first 2 years of life, and in half of them, Mom looks, I don't know how to describe it, uncomfortable, like she doesn't want to be holding you." My stomach dropped. "Where are Mom and Dad?" "Dad's in his study. He's been in there since I got here 2 hours ago." "Mom," Emma's voice cracked. "Mom locked herself in their bedroom and won't come out. She won't even talk to Dad." We walked into the living room where Jake was sitting on the couch, his laptop open, his face grim. Tommy was pacing by the window, running his hands through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "Sarah," Jake looked up when I entered. His Navy training had taught him to stay calm under pressure, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "I've been doing some digging online. That Facebook post has been shared 12 times. People are asking questions we don't have answers to." "What kind of questions?" Tommy stopped pacing and turned to face me. At 25, he was still the baby of the family, but right now he looked older than his years. Questions about why you look so different from the rest of us. Questions about why Mom never talks about you. Sarah, Mrs. Henderson from down the street, commented that she's lived here for 20 years and has never once heard Mom mention having 4 children. She thought there were only 3 of us. The room fell silent, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. The same clock that had marked time throughout my childhood, through family dinners and Christmas mornings and birthday parties where I always felt like I was watching from the outside. "There's more," Emma said quietly. She sat down next to Jake and opened one of the photo albums she'd been looking through. "Look at this." She showed me a page of photos from what was labeled Jake's First Christmas in Mom's careful handwriting. Jake as a baby, surrounded by extended family, everyone beaming. The next page, Emma's first Christmas. Same setup, same joy. Then, Tommy's first Christmas. "Now look at this." Emma flipped to a page near the back. There were only 3 photos, and they were labeled Sarah's second Christmas. Not first, second. And in the photos, I was clearly older than a baby, maybe 18 months old. Mom was holding me, but she was looking at the camera with an expression I'd never seen before. Not joy, not love. Something closer to resignation. "Emma," I whispered, "where are the photos from my first Christmas?" "That's just it," Jake said, closing his laptop and leaning forward. "We can't find any. We've been through every album, every box in the attic. It's like you didn't exist until you were almost 2 years old." The front door opened and closed with a bang that made us all jump. Dad appeared in the doorway, his usually neat gray hair disheveled, his face pale. At 58, Robert Mitchell had always been the steady presence in our family, the one who fixed scraped knees and helped with homework and taught us all how to drive. But right now, he looked like a man who'd aged 10 years in a single afternoon. "Kids," he said, his voice hoarse, "we need to talk. All of us." He looked directly at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made my chest tighten. "Sarah, honey, there are things about your birth, about how you came to be part of this family, that your mother and I, that we should have told you a long time ago." Emma grabbed my hand and squeezed it tight. "Dad, what are you saying?" He sat down heavily in his recliner, the same chair where he'd read us bedtime stories and helped us with math homework. "I'm saying that the woman upstairs, your mother, has been keeping a secret for 28 years. And today, thanks to social media and people asking the right questions, that secret is about to come out whether she wants it to or not." The grandfather clock chimed 7 times, and in the silence that followed, I realized that everything I thought I knew about my life was about to change forever. Dad's hands were shaking as he reached for the glass of water on the side table next to his chair. In all my 28 years, I had never seen my father's hands shake. This was the man who'd remained calm when Jake broke his arm falling out of the oak tree in our backyard, who'd talked Emma through her panic attacks before big exams, who'd driven through a blizzard to pick up Tommy from a college party when his ride fell through. "Dad," Jake's voice was steady, controlled. "Just tell us what's going on." Robert Mitchell looked at each of us, his gaze lingering longest on me. "Sarah, sweetheart, do you remember anything about being very young? Before you were maybe 3 or 4? I searched my memory, but it was like trying to grab smoke. Not really. I mean, I remember fragments. Playing in the backyard, Emma teaching me to tie my shoes, Tommy being born when I was 3, but nothing before that. That's because you weren't here before that," Dad said quietly. "You came to live with us when you were 22 months old." The words hit me like a physical blow. Emma's hand tightened around mine so hard it hurt. Tommy sank into the armchair across from Dad, his face white. Jake just stared, his military composure finally cracking. "What do you mean? Came to live with you?" My voice sounded strange, distant, like it was coming from someone else. Dad rubbed his face with both hands. "Your mother, Linda, she had an affair. It lasted about 6 months, back in 1994. I found out when she was 4 months pregnant." The room spun around me. I felt Emma's arm wrap around my shoulders, anchoring me to reality. "Pregnant with me," I whispered. "Yes." Dad's voice broke on the word. "She swore it was over, that she'd made a terrible mistake. She begged me not to leave, said she'd do anything to make it right. We went to counseling. We tried to work through it. And when you were born," he paused, looking directly at me. "Sarah, you have to understand. The moment I saw you in that hospital, you became my daughter. Biology didn't matter. You were this perfect little person, and you were mine. But Mom didn't feel the same way," I said, the pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. Dad's silence was answer enough. "Jesus Christ," Tommy breathed. "That's why she's always been different with Sarah. That's why she never posts about her, never talks about her the same way she talks about us." "Where was I for the first 22 months? I asked, though part of me wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "With him," Dad said simply. "Your biological father. Linda, after you were born, she couldn't handle it. Every time she looked at you, she saw her mistake, her betrayal. She had what the doctors called severe postpartum depression, but it was more than that. She couldn't bond with you. She could barely hold you." Emma was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. "Dad, how could you let her give Sarah away?" "I didn't want to." Dad's voice rose slightly, the first real emotion he'd shown. "I fought for you, Sarah. I wanted to keep you from the day you were born. But your mother, she was in such a dark place. She convinced herself that you'd be better off with your biological father, that she was toxic for you, that she'd never be able to love you the way you deserved. So she just gave me away?" The words tasted bitter. "She told everyone you were staying with her sister in Oklahoma for a while, that she needed help recovering from a difficult birth. Most people forgot to ask after a few months. And your biological father, he wanted you. He was single, he had a good job. He seemed capable of giving you a stable home." Jake leaned forward, his journalist instincts kicking in. "What changed? Why did Sarah come back?" Dad was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. Finally, he said, "He died. Car accident on I-35, just outside of Austin. You were in the car, Sarah, but you were in your car seat in the back. You barely had a scratch on you, but he..." Dad's voice trailed off. "I was in the car when my biological father died," I said slowly, trying to process this information. "And I don't remember any of it. You were so young, and the trauma, the doctor said it was normal for you not to remember. When Child Protective Services called us, Linda had a complete breakdown. She'd spent almost 2 years trying to convince herself she'd done the right thing, and suddenly you were coming back, and she wasn't ready. But you were, Emma said, looking at Dad with something like awe. I was, Dad confirmed. I'd never stopped thinking about you, never stopped hoping you'd come home. When that social worker called and said you needed a family, I didn't hesitate. I told Linda we were bringing you home, and that was final. And Mom just went along with it? She tried, Dad said sadly. She really did try, Sarah. But every time she looked at you, she saw her affair, her betrayal, her failure as a mother. She couldn't get past it. She provided for you. She took care of your basic needs. But the emotional connection, it was never there. I thought about all the times I'd tried to get Mom's attention, all the school plays where she'd seemed distracted, all the achievements that were met with polite congratulations instead of genuine pride, all the times I'd wondered what was wrong with me, why I couldn't make my own mother love me the way she loved my siblings. Does anyone else know? Tommy asked. Your Aunt Carol suspects something, Dad said. She was the one who helped us with the legal paperwork when you came back. And a few of the older neighbors might remember, but most people just accepted that you'd been away, and now you were back. What about my biological father? I asked. What was his name? Did he have family? Dad hesitated. His name was David Chen. He was a software engineer, worked for a tech company in Austin. As for family, Dad looked uncomfortable. Sarah, there's more. Things that your mother made me promise never to tell you. Emma stood up abruptly. No more secrets. Whatever it is, she deserves to know. We all deserve to know. From upstairs, we heard a door slam, followed by footsteps on the stairs. Mom appeared in the doorway, her face blotchy from crying, her usually perfect hair a mess. She looked at all of us sitting there, then her gaze fixed on me. I heard you talking, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I heard you telling them about David. The way she said his name, with a mixture of pain and something else I couldn't identify, made my stomach clench. Linda, Dad warned. No, Robert. If we're doing this, if we're finally telling the truth after all these years, then we're telling all of it. She looked directly at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw something in her eyes that looked almost like regret. Sarah, your biological father didn't just die in that car accident. He was coming to see me. He'd been calling, saying he wanted to work things out, that he wanted us to be a family, all 3 of us. The room went completely silent. He was coming to take me away from you, I whispered, understanding flooding through me. Mom nodded, tears streaming down her face, and I was going to let him. The silence that followed Mom's confession was deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat, the tick of the grandfather clock, the distant hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. But mostly I could hear the sound of my entire understanding of my life crumbling around me. You were going to leave Dad? Emma's voice was barely a whisper. You were going to take Sarah and leave? Mom sank onto the couch next to Emma, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. At 55, Linda Mitchell had always been the picture of suburban perfection. Perfectly styled blonde hair, coordinated outfits, a smile for every neighbor and church friend. But right now, she looked broken. I was 26 years old and completely lost, Mom said, staring at her hands. I'd made this terrible mistake, this affair that I couldn't take back. And then when Sarah was born, every time I looked at her, I saw David. I saw my betrayal. I saw everything I'd destroyed. So you gave her away, Jake said, his voice hard in a way I'd never heard before. You gave away your own daughter because you couldn't deal with your guilt. I thought it was best for everyone. Mom's voice cracked. David wanted her. He loved her in a way that I couldn't. And your father, he was trying so hard to forgive me, to move past what I'd done. But having Sarah there was like having a constant reminder of my affair living in our house. Dad leaned forward in his chair. Linda, that's not how I felt. Yes, it was, Mom interrupted, looking at him with red-rimmed eyes. Don't lie to protect me now, Robert. I saw how you looked at her sometimes. You loved her. I know you did. But there were moments when you'd see David in her face, and I could see the pain in your eyes. I found my voice, though it sounded strange and hollow. So you sent me away to make your life easier. I sent you away because I thought David could give you what I couldn't, Mom said, turning to face me directly for the first time. He was so excited to be a father, Sarah. He had your nursery all set up. He'd bought every baby book ever written. He was taking parenting classes. He wanted you in a way that I was too broken to want you. But then he started calling," Dad said quietly. Mom nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. About 6 months after Sarah went to live with him, David started reaching out. At first, it was just updates about how she was doing. Photos, little videos of her taking her first steps, saying her first words. But then what? Tommy asked. Then he started saying he missed me, Mom continued. That he'd made a mistake letting me go. That he wanted us to try again, to be a real family. He said Sarah needed her mother, that she was asking for Mama, and he didn't know how to explain why I wasn't there. Emma was staring at Mom like she'd never seen her before. "And you were considering it." "I was," Mom admitted. "I was so miserable, so guilty about everything I'd done. Part of me thought maybe this was how I could fix it all. Maybe I could learn to love Sarah the way she deserved if we were all together, if I wasn't constantly being reminded of what I'd done to your father." "What about us?" Jake's voice was ice cold. "What about your other 3 children? Were you just going to abandon us?" Mom flinched like he'd slapped her. "I don't know. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was seeing a therapist, taking medication for depression, but I was still so lost. David kept calling, kept saying that Sarah was crying for me, that she needed her real mother. I am her real mother," Dad said firmly, and the protective tone in his voice made my chest tight. "I was there for every scraped knee, every nightmare, every fever. Biology doesn't make you a parent. I know that now," Mom whispered. "But back then, I was drowning in guilt and shame, and David was offering me what felt like redemption." "So what happened?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would destroy me. "The day he died, he was coming to get you?" Mom nodded slowly. "We'd made plans. He was going to drive up from Austin that weekend. We were going to talk, figure out how to move forward together. I'd already started packing a bag." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Not just that she'd given me away as a baby, but that she'd been planning to abandon Dad and my siblings to run away with a man she'd had an affair with, a man who was essentially a stranger to her. "Did Dad know?" Emma asked. "I suspected something," Dad said quietly. Linda had been acting strange, secretive. She was getting phone calls she wouldn't explain, and she'd started talking about taking a weekend trip to clear her head. But I didn't know about the plan until after David died, when she had her breakdown." "Breakdown?" I looked between my parents. "When the police called to tell us about the accident," Mom said, her voice barely audible. "When they said David was dead and that you were in the hospital, I completely fell apart. All the guilt, all the shame, all the what-ifs came crashing down at once. I realized that I'd been about to destroy our family for a fantasy, for some idea that running away would solve all my problems. And that's when you decided you wanted me back," I said, the pieces falling into place. "That's when I realized I'd been given a second chance," Mom corrected. "A chance to be the mother you deserved, to make up for the terrible choices I'd made. But by then, the damage was done. I'd missed your first steps, your first words, almost 2 years of your life. And the guilt of that, combined with the guilt of the affair, of almost leaving your father and siblings, I couldn't get past it." Jake stood up abruptly and started pacing. "So instead of dealing with your guilt and getting help, you just emotionally abandoned Sarah for the rest of her life?" "I tried," Mom said desperately. "I really tried to bond with her, to love her the way I loved the rest of you. But every time I looked at her, I saw all my failures. I saw the affair. I saw giving her away. I saw almost abandoning my family. She became a living reminder of the worst period of my life." "That's not fair to Sarah," Emma said, her voice shaking with anger. "None of that was her fault. She was just a baby." "I know that," Mom sobbed. "I've always known that. But knowing something intellectually and being able to feel it emotionally are 2 different things. I've been in therapy on and off for years, trying to work through it, but the damage was done so early, and I was too proud, too ashamed to admit what was really wrong." I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady. 28 years of feeling like an outsider in my own family suddenly made perfect sense. 28 years of wondering what was wrong with me, why I couldn't earn my mother's love, why I always felt like I was performing for an audience that would never applaud. "I need some air," I said, heading toward the back door. "Sarah, wait," Dad called after me. But I was already outside, standing in the backyard where I'd played as a child, where I'd learned to ride a bike, where I'd had birthday parties that my mother attended but never seemed to truly enjoy. The Texas evening air was warm and humid, and I could hear the distant sound of traffic on the highway where my biological father had died, coming to collect the woman who'd given me away. Behind me, I could hear my family arguing through the open door. Emma and Jake demanding answers, Tommy asking questions, Dad trying to keep the peace, Mom crying and apologizing. But all I could think about was a man named David Chen, who'd wanted me enough to die trying to bring me home to a woman who'd never really wanted me at all. And for the first time in my life, I wondered what my life would have been like if that car accident had never happened. I sat on the old wooden swing that Dad had hung from the oak tree when I was 5, the same swing where I'd spent countless hours as a child, pumping my legs and trying to swing high enough to touch the clouds. The irony wasn't lost on me. Even this swing, this symbol of childhood innocence, had been installed after I'd already lived through trauma I couldn't remember. The back door opened and closed softly. I expected Dad, but it was Emma who walked across the yard, her heels clicking on the stone path Mom had installed 2 summers ago. She kicked off her shoes and sat down in the grass next to the swing, looking up at me with eyes that were still red from crying. I keep thinking about all the times I defended her, Emma said quietly. All the times you'd ask me why Mom seemed different with you, and I'd make excuses. I'd say she was just tired, or stressed, or that you were being too sensitive. I dragged my feet to stop the swing's gentle motion. You didn't know, but I should have. Emma's voice was fierce. I'm your big sister. I should have protected you. I should have seen what was happening. Em, you were a kid too. You were only 2 when I came back. How could you have known? Emma pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. Do you remember when you were 7, and you asked me why Mom never came to your school plays the way she came to mine and Jake's? I did remember. It had been after the spring musical where I'd played a flower in the chorus. All the other kids had parents taking pictures, bringing flowers, making a fuss. Mom had been there, sitting in the back, but she'd left immediately after without saying anything about my performance. You told me she was probably just tired from work, I said. I knew it was a lie even then, Emma admitted, but I was 9 years old, and I didn't know how to explain something I didn't understand myself. I just knew that Mom acted different around you, and it made me uncomfortable, so I pretended it wasn't happening. The back door opened again, and this time it was Jake who joined us. He sat down on the other side of Emma, his long legs stretched out in front of him. At 32, Jake had always been the protector of the family, the one who'd taught me how to throw a punch when Billy Morrison was bullying me in 3rd grade, the one who'd driven down from college to take me to my senior prom when my date got food poisoning. I've been thinking, Jake said, his voice careful and measured, about all the family vacations where Mom would take hundreds of pictures of the 3 of us, but you'd only be in group shots, about how she'd brag about our accomplishments to her friends, but when people asked about you, she'd just say you were doing fine and change the subject. I noticed that too, Emma added. At my wedding, remember? She spent the entire reception telling people about Jake's promotion and Tommy's scholarship, but when Mrs. Patterson asked about your job, Mom just said you worked in computers and walked away. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. I work in marketing. I've worked in marketing for 6 years. She's never once asked me what I actually do. Because asking would mean caring, Jake said bluntly, and caring would mean confronting all the guilt and shame she's been carrying around for 28 years. Tommy appeared in the doorway, hesitating before walking over to join us. At 25, he was the baby of the family, but he'd always been wise beyond his years. He sat down cross-legged in front of the swing, looking up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I have a confession, Tommy said quietly. When I was in high school, I overheard Mom on the phone with Aunt Carol. They were talking about you, about how Mom was worried she'd never be able to love you properly. I didn't understand what it meant at the time, but it stuck with me. Why didn't you ever say anything? Emma asked. Because I was 15 and scared, Tommy admitted. And because part of me was afraid that if I asked too many questions, I'd find out something that would change everything. Turns out I was right. We sat in silence for a while, the 4 of us processing the weight of what we'd learned. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded me of the countless summer evenings we'd spent in this same backyard, playing games and having barbecues and pretending we were a normal, happy family. What happens now? I finally asked. Now we figure out how to move forward, Jake said. As a family, the four of us, and Dad. What about Mom? Emma was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, Sarah. I love her. She's our mother. But what she did to you, what she's been doing to you your entire life, I don't know how to forgive that. She needs help, Tommy said. Real help. Not just therapy sessions she goes to when she feels guilty. She needs to face what she did and figure out how to make it right. Can it be made right? I asked. 28 years of feeling like I didn't belong, like I was somehow defective, like I wasn't worthy of my own mother's love. How do you fix that? I don't know if you can fix it, Jake said honestly. But maybe you can build something new, something better. The back door opened one more time, and Dad stepped out onto the patio. He looked older than he had that morning, worn down by the weight of secrets finally revealed. He walked over to us slowly, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. How are you holding up, sweetheart? He asked, looking directly at me. I don't know, I answered honestly. I feel like my entire life has been a lie. Not your entire life, Dad said firmly. The love I have for you, the love your siblings have for you, that's real. That's never been a lie. But Mom, your mother is broken, Sarah, Dad interrupted. She's been broken for a long time, and instead of getting the help she needed, she let that brokenness poison her relationship with you. That's on her, not on you. Dad, Emma said carefully, what are you going to do? About Mom, I mean. Dad was quiet for a long time, staring out at the fence line where Mom's roses were blooming in the fading light. I don't know, he finally admitted. I've been covering for her, making excuses for her behavior toward Sarah for 26 years. I told myself I was protecting the family, keeping us together, but really I was just enabling her to continue hurting the daughter I love. You were trying to do the right thing, Tommy said. Was I? Dad asked. Or was I just taking the easy way out? It would have been harder to confront Linda, to demand she get help, to threaten to leave if she didn't change. It was easier to just manage the situation, to try to give Sarah extra love to make up for what Linda wasn't giving her. I looked at this man who'd raised me, who'd been the only parent to truly love me unconditionally, and felt my heart break for him. Dad, you did the best you could. Did I? Because right now, looking at the pain in your eyes, I feel like I failed you. I should have protected you better. I should have demanded more from your mother. What's done is done, Jake said. The question is what we do now. Dad nodded slowly. Now we figure out how to heal. All of us. And your mother. Your mother needs to decide if she wants to be part of that healing, or if she's going to continue living in the past. From inside the house, we could hear Mom crying, the sound carrying through the open windows. It was a broken, desperate sound that spoke of years of guilt and shame finally coming to the surface. I should go talk to her, Dad said. But he didn't move. Maybe, Emma said carefully. It's time for Mom to figure some things out on her own, without you protecting her from the consequences of her choices. Dad looked at Emma with something like surprise, then nodded slowly. Maybe you're right. As the last light faded from the sky, the five of us sat in the backyard of my childhood home, surrounded by the ghosts of family dinners and birthday parties and Christmas mornings that had never been quite what they seemed. Tomorrow, we'd have to figure out how to rebuild our family from the wreckage of 28 years of secrets and lies. But tonight, for the first time in my life, I felt like I truly belonged somewhere. Not because of the woman who'd given birth to me and then spent my entire life punishing me for existing, but because of the man who'd chosen to be my father, and the siblings who'd chosen to be my family. It wasn't the family I'd thought I had, but maybe it was the family I'd always needed. I woke up the next morning in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by the remnants of a life I was only now beginning to understand. The walls were still painted the soft lavender I'd chosen when I was 12, and my old bookshelf still held the collection of novels that had been my escape during the lonely teenage years when I couldn't figure out why I felt like a stranger in my own home. My phone showed 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Word had spread beyond Facebook. Apparently, Margaret Hoffman's innocent question had opened a floodgate that couldn't be closed. Extended family members, family friends, even some of my old high school classmates had seen the post and were reaching out with questions, concerns, and in some cases, their own memories of things that hadn't quite added up over the years. I scrolled through the messages, my stomach churning with each one. Sarah, honey, This is your Aunt Carol. I think we need to talk. There are things about your early years that your parents made me promise never to discuss. But after yesterday... Hey, Sarah. It's Mike from high school. I saw the Facebook drama. My mom always wondered why your mom seemed so distant at school events. Now it makes sense. I'm sorry. Sarah, this is cousin Jennifer. I remember asking my mom when I was little why Aunt Linda never seemed happy when she talked about you. Mom told me to mind my own business, but I never forgot it. The most devastating message was from Mrs. Patterson, our elderly neighbor who'd known our family since before I was born. Sweet Sarah, I've been awake all night thinking about your family's situation. I need you to know that when you came back to live with your parents when you were almost 2, you were the saddest little girl I'd ever seen. You barely spoke. You flinched when people tried to touch you, and you cried for someone called Daddy David for months. Your father Robert was so patient with you, but your mother, honey, I'm sorry to say this, but she could barely look at you. I always wondered what had happened, but it wasn't my place to ask. I set the phone aside, my hands shaking. Even as a toddler, I'd been grieving for David Chen, the man who'd wanted me, who'd loved me, who'd died trying to bring me back to a woman who'd never really wanted me in the first place. There was a soft knock on my bedroom door. Sarah? It's Dad. Can I come in? Yeah. Dad entered carrying 2 cups of coffee, looking like he hadn't slept at all. His usually neat gray hair was sticking up in places, and he was still wearing yesterday's clothes. He handed me one of the cups and sat down on the edge of my bed, the same spot where he'd sat countless times throughout my childhood when I'd had nightmares or needed help with homework. How are you feeling, sweetheart? Like my entire life has been turned upside down, I said honestly. Dad, Mrs. Patterson texted me. She said when I came back I was crying for Daddy David. I was grieving for him, wasn't I? Dad's face crumpled slightly. You were. For months, you'd wake up crying for him. You'd ask when Daddy David was coming back, when you were going home. It broke my heart because I wanted so badly to be enough for you. But you were mourning the only father you'd ever known. How did you handle it? How did you not resent me for missing him? Sarah. Dad set down his coffee and took my hands in his. You were a baby who'd lost the person you loved most in the world. How could I resent you for that? If anything, it made me more determined to earn your love, to prove that I could be the father you needed. And Mom? Dad was quiet for a long moment. Your mother saw your grief for David as proof that she'd been right to give you away in the first place. She convinced herself that you'd never really love us, that you'd always prefer him, that bringing you back had been a mistake. So she gave up on me before I even had a chance to adjust. She gave up on herself, Dad corrected. She was so consumed with guilt and shame that she couldn't see past her own pain to help you with yours. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking our coffee and watching the morning sun stream through my bedroom windows. Finally, Dad spoke again. Sarah, there's something else you need to know. About David. About his family. My stomach clenched. What about them? He had a sister. Lives in Austin. Her name is Michelle Chen Rodriguez. She's been trying to contact your mother for years. Wanting to meet you. Wanting to tell you about your biological father. Your mother always refused to give her our contact information. I stared at Dad, processing this new information. I have an aunt I've never met. Someone who knew David, who could tell me about him. More than that, Dad said gently. Michelle has photos of you from when you lived with David, videos of your first steps, recordings of your first words. She has the memories of your early childhood that we don't have. The coffee cup slipped from my hands, spilling across my comforter. She has videos of me as a baby. According to the letters she sent over the years, David documented everything. He was so proud of you, so excited to be your father. Michelle kept everything after he died, hoping that someday she'd be able to share it with you. I felt tears streaming down my face, but for the first time since this nightmare began, they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of something that felt almost like hope. Dad, I want to meet her. I want to see those videos. I thought you might, Dad said, pulling a piece of paper from his pocket. I found her latest letter in your mother's jewelry box last night. Here's her phone number. I took the paper with trembling hands. Michelle Chen Rodriguez, a woman who'd been trying to reach me for years, who had pieces of my history that had been stolen from me. Does Mom know you're giving me this? Your mother and I had a long conversation last night after you kids went to bed, Dad said carefully. She's agreed to start intensive therapy, And she's also agreed that it's time for you to know the truth about everything, including David's family. Where is she now? She drove to Aunt Carol's house early this morning. She said she needed time to think, to figure out how to face what she's done. She also said, Dad paused, looking uncomfortable. She said she thinks it might be better if she wasn't here when you call Michelle. She doesn't want her presence to influence your decision about whether or not to build a relationship with David's family. I looked down at the phone number in my hands. 10 digits that could connect me to a woman who'd known me as a baby, who'd loved David Chen, who could tell me about the man who'd died trying to bring me home. Dad, what if I like them better than I like our family? What if I decide I want to be part of their family instead of ours? Dad was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. Then I'll be sad, but I'll understand. Sarah, you've spent 28 years feeling like you didn't quite belong anywhere. If David's family can give you that sense of belonging, then that's what you deserve. But you're my dad, I said, the words coming out in a rush. Biology doesn't matter, you said so yourself. You're the one who raised me, who loved me, who was there for everything that mattered. And I always will be, Dad said firmly. But that doesn't mean you can't also have a relationship with the people who love David, who can tell you about the man who wanted you so much he died trying to get you back. I looked at the phone number again, then at Dad. Will you stay with me when I call her? If you want me to. I do. I picked up my phone, my hands still shaking slightly. Dad, what if she doesn't want to talk to me? What if too much time has passed? Sweetheart, Dad said with a small smile. According to her letters, Michelle Chen Rodriguez has been waiting 26 years for this phone call. I don't think too much time has passed. I dialed the number before I could lose my nerve. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a woman's voice answered, warm and slightly accented. Hello? Hi, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Is this Michelle Chen Rodriguez? There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Oh my God, is this Sarah? Yes, I said, tears streaming down my face again. Yes, this is Sarah. And for the first time in my life, I heard someone say my name with the same joy and love that I'd always heard in Dad's voice when he talked about Jake, Emma, and Tommy. Sarah, Michelle whispered, and I could hear her crying too. Oh, sweetheart, I've been waiting so long to talk to you. 3 months later, I stood in the backyard of Michelle Chen Rodriguez's house in Austin, watching home videos of myself as a toddler on her laptop. The woman on the screen looked nothing like the mother I'd grown up with. This woman was laughing, animated, completely absorbed in playing with a little girl who had my eyes and David Chen's smile. That's David teaching you to walk, Michelle said, pointing to the screen where a tall, gentle-looking man with kind eyes was holding my hands as I took wobbly steps across a living room I didn't remember. You were so determined. You'd fall down and immediately get back up and try again. I watched this stranger who was my biological father, seeing myself in his expressions, his mannerisms, the way he threw back his head when he laughed. For the first time in my life, I understood where my stubborn streak came from, why I'd always been the type of person who refused to give up, even when things seemed impossible. He loved you so much, Michelle continued, her voice soft with memory. He used to call me every day with updates about what you'd done, what new word you'd learned, how you'd made him laugh. He said being your father was the best thing that had ever happened to him. Dad squeezed my shoulder. He'd driven down to Austin with me for this meeting, understanding that I needed his support as I navigated this new relationship. Over the past 3 months, he'd been my anchor as our family slowly began to heal from decades of secrets and lies. What was he like? I asked Michelle. As a person, I mean. Michelle smiled, the same warm expression I'd seen in dozens of photos she'd shown me throughout the afternoon. He was kind, incredibly patient, and absolutely brilliant. He worked as a software engineer, but his real passion was photography. He took thousands of pictures of you, Sarah. He documented everything because he said he wanted to make sure you'd always know how much you were loved. She pulled out another photo album, this one filled with pictures of David and me. There I was, maybe 18 months old, sitting on his shoulders at a park. There we were at what looked like a zoo, David pointing at elephants while I clapped my hands in delight. In every single photo, David was looking at me like I was the most precious thing in the world. He was planning to propose to your mother, Michelle said quietly. The day he died, he had a ring in his car. He'd been carrying it around for weeks, trying to work up the courage to ask her to marry him and make your little family official. I felt Dad tense beside me, and I reached for his hand. Over the past 3 months, we'd all learned to navigate the complicated emotions that came with my dual heritage. Dad had struggled initially with jealousy and insecurity, wondering if learning about David would somehow diminish our relationship. But therapy, both individual and family, had helped us understand that love isn't finite, that caring about David's memory didn't mean I loved Dad any less. I'm glad he wanted that, I said honestly. I'm glad he wanted us to be a real family. He did, Michelle confirmed. But Sarah, I want you to know something important. David never spoke badly about Linda, even after she gave you to him. He said he understood that she was struggling, that having an affair and getting pregnant had turned her world upside down. He hoped that someday, when she was ready, you could all figure out how to be a family together. He sounds like he was a good man, Dad said, and I could hear the effort it took for him to say those words without bitterness. He was, Michelle agreed. And Robert, I want you to know how grateful I am for everything you've done for Sarah. David would have been so thankful that she ended up with someone who loved her the way you do. We spent the rest of the afternoon looking through photo albums and watching videos. Michelle showed me David's old room, which she'd kept exactly as he'd left it, and gave me some of his photography equipment that she thought I might want. She also gave me a letter he'd written to me on my first birthday, sealed in an envelope with my name on it in his careful handwriting. As the sun began to set, Dad and I prepared to drive back to Dallas. Michelle walked us to the car, carrying a box filled with photos, videos, and mementos she wanted me to have. Sarah, she said as we reached the car, I want you to know that you'll always have a place in our family. David's parents, your grandparents, they're both still alive and living in California. They've been wanting to meet you for years, and I have 2 kids of my own now, your cousins. We'd love for you to be part of our lives, in whatever way feels comfortable for you. I'd like that, I said, meaning it. I'd like to know all of you. Michelle hugged me tightly, and I felt something I'd never experienced before. The embrace of someone who loved me simply because I was David's daughter, without any complicated history or emotional baggage attached. The drive back to Dallas was quiet, both Dad and I lost in our own thoughts. Finally, as we reached the outskirts of the city, Dad spoke. How are you feeling about everything? Grateful, I said without hesitation. Grateful to finally know the truth. Grateful to learn about David. Grateful that Michelle wanted to share all of this with me. And grateful for you, Dad, for choosing to love me, for fighting to bring me home, for being the father I needed even when it was complicated. And your mother? That was the harder question. Mom had been in intensive therapy for 3 months, working with a specialist who dealt with postpartum depression, guilt, and attachment disorders. She'd written me several letters, long, painful, honest letters, where she took full responsibility for her failures as a mother and outlined the work she was doing to understand and change her behavior. I'm not ready to forgive her yet, I said honestly, but I'm not as angry as I was. I think I'm starting to understand that she was broken in a way that had nothing to do with me, and that her inability to love me properly was about her limitations, not my worth. That's very mature of you. I learned it from you, I said. You taught me that love is a choice, not just a feeling. You chose to love me every day for 26 years, even when it was hard, even when it meant dealing with Mom's issues. That's the kind of parent I want to be someday. Dad smiled, the first genuinely happy expression I'd seen from him in months. You're going to be an amazing parent, Sarah, and your children are going to be so lucky to have you. As we pulled into the driveway of my childhood home, I saw that the lights were on in the living room. Through the window, I could see Emma, Jake, and Tommy waiting for us, probably eager to hear about my day with Michelle. Ready to go share your news with your siblings? Dad asked. Yeah, I said, looking at the house where I'd grown up feeling like an outsider, where I'd spent years wondering what was wrong with me, where I'd finally learned the truth that set me free. I'm ready. We walked into the house together, and I was immediately surrounded by Emma, Jake, and Tommy, all of them talking at once, wanting to know about Michelle, about the photos, about David. For the first time in my life, I felt like I truly belonged in this chaos, in this loud, messy, complicated family that had chosen to love me despite everything. Later that evening, after I'd shared stories and photos with my siblings, after we'd ordered pizza and laughed until our sides hurt, I sat alone in my childhood bedroom reading the letter David had written to me on my first birthday. "My dearest Sarah," it began. "Today you turned 1 year old, and I can't believe how fast this year has gone by. You've brought so much joy into my life, so much purpose and meaning. Every day with you is a gift, and I promise you that no matter what happens, no matter where life takes us, you will always be loved. You will always be wanted. You will always be enough, exactly as you are." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the box with all the other mementos Michelle had given me. Tomorrow, I would drive back to Austin to start building relationships with David's family. Next week, I would continue the therapy that was helping me process 28 years of feeling unwanted. Next month, I would decide whether I was ready to have a conversation with Mom about the possibility of rebuilding our relationship. But tonight, I was exactly where I belonged, in a house full of people who loved me, surrounded by the truth that had finally set me free, holding the words of a man who'd wanted me so much he died trying to bring me home. I wasn't my mother's dirty little secret anymore. I was Sarah Mitchell, daughter of Robert Mitchell and David Chen, sister to Emma, Jake, and Tommy, member of 2 families who loved me for exactly who I was. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough.